Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. Subject Computer Science for 11th A. Chapter 11 Functions Part 3. Last class we discussed about the string manipulation functions like string can copy, learn, compare, cat, upper, string lower, and mathematical functions like cosine, cos, square root, and power. So in this session we are going to discuss about user defined function. How introduction about user define and function definition, function prototype, use of void command accessing a function, formal and actual parameters or arguments, default argument and constant argument. Let's start our class. Introduction about user defined function. So user defined function, already we know that the function which are created by user are called user defined function. A function can optionally define input parameters that enable callers to pass argument into the function. A function can also optionally return a value as output. Functions are useful for encapsulating common operation in a single reusable block, ideally with a name that clearly describes what the function does. So generally what the user defined function have to declare is declare the function name. That name should be clearly describe about the functionality of that function, and input argument which is optional, it is up to the user requirement, and output is also optional in user defined function. So next one, how we can define the user defined function. The general syntax or rules for defining a user defined function is first a return data type. First we want to mention the return data type, a valid C++ data type. After, give the space and give the function name. The function name should be a valid user defined function name. It should follow the rules of declaring a variable name, and within the parentheses, if there was any input for this function, that input can be declared in this parentheses, within this parentheses. That is called the parameter list. So that is what called it as a parameter list. It means more than one input parameters can be set, or zero parameters can also be set. If there was no parameters or input parameters for this function, then you can leave this parenthesis blank, but you should use this parenthesis, open and close parenthesis, because parenthesis is a symbolic representation of function. After that, open the brace and type the body of the function, that is the coding related to this block, and after ending the block, close the parenthesis. So this is the rule that should be followed when declaring a function or defining a function. Next one, function prototype. C++ program can contain any number of functions, but it must always have only one main function to begin the program execution. So we can write the definition of function in any order as we wish. Either we can declare the main function first and all the user defined function next, or we can define all the user defined function before the main function, but the basic condition here is main function should be declared, because C++ program starts all its execution from main function and end its execution at main function. So prototype above provides the following information to the compiler. The prototyping refers to the return value, data type, function name, list of arguments. See the diagram. Here it is a prototype of a function, namely fact. So long is the output or return data type of this function. Fact is the function name. Within the parentheses, we declare two list of argument or parameters. So this function accept two inputs. One is int, another one is double. So all this information like our return data type of the function, user defined function, name of the function, and number of input arguments are given to the compiler through the prototyping. So prototyping means defining, declaring a function. So in the same way here you can see there was another function. The output of the function is int and function name is display accept two inputs. Both the inputs are int. So in this manner prototype gives the important information to the compiler for execution. Next one, use of void command in function. Void is a data type that has two important purposes. Number one, to indicate that function does not return a value. Number two, to declare a generic pointer. So void, if you declare void, if you use void data type as a return value, then it means the function which you declare with the void returns that nothing to the uh, caller. So here you can see void fun within the function parameter list we give the void. This function returns tells the compiler that neither receive values from the calling program nor return a value to the calling program. So this function is not going to receive any input. This function is not going to give any output to the calling program. So some of the example here you can see display calling function without a return value and without any argument. Here you can see both the return and input arguments are nil. Here you can see the return value is nil but the accept to input. Here you can see the calling function will with a return value and without any argument. So this will calling function with a return value and with the argument. So this is a simple example for void command. So void is a data type. Void is a command used in function definition to declare whether the function declare that the function is not going to return no value to the caller program or accept no value from the caller program. Next one, accessing a function. So after declaring a function, giving the necessary information like return data type, function name and input arguments, and within the open brace giving the block for the codes for the function, the user can access the function explicitly using its name and required arguments to be passed. The compiler refers to the function prototype to check whether the function has been called correctly. For example, if any spelling mistake is made when calling a function, then compiler will return error. In the same way, if any argument is compulsory, then user should return the number of argument to access the function. If the possible values is not passed to that function, but then compiler will return the errors. In the same way, if type conversion is impossible, the compiler generate an error message. For example, if a function accept two integer value, but you pass the values in you pass a value in character, then the compiler will return error. In the same way, if the function accept two double values as an input, then if you pass the input in integer, then it will convert this integer data type explicitly into double without any problem. So this is how we can access a function. So here in the diagram you can see a program is written where we create a new user defined function before the main function, namely sum. So here this is the function user defined function. Output data type is int, function name is sum. This is the formal parameters. It means the input. So these input parameters are otherwise called as formal parameters, and here within the block we give the coding related for this function. So this function sum simply accept x and y and add it and return the value. So how this function can be called in main function? So go to the main function. So here there was a two variable a b. We accept a value from the user and store in the a, accept b value, and here we use the sum function. So this is the prototype of function. So sum a comma b. So a comma b is the variable which store the actual input of the user. So that's why this input a comma b is called as actual parameter. When we call this function sum with this parameter copies from a to x, b to y, and when the function process, this will simply handle the value of x and value of y, and some function didn't touch the a and b values and unable to alter the values of a and b. So that's why it is called the actual parameter and it is called formal parameter. So this is the calling area, this is the function called here. So this function is called here, this is called the calling area. So we can understand this program by a concept by using the program 11.15. So open the developer C++ program, open the file 11.15 where we create a function, user defined function, and we call the function, we pass the values. So first open the file 11.5. So developer C++, just a second. Okay, so type the file name 11.15 and click OK button. Not oh, now you can see the file. So here, after declaring the namespace standard, we created a function prototype. We declared a function before main, namely sum, and output data type is int. This function will accept two input and the data types are declared int x, y, and this function return the value of adding the x plus y. So this is the main function. Two variables are declared values of user defined accept from users and store in the value variable ab, and both the values are passed as a input to the sum function. Here we call the sum function. These ab are called actual parameters and xy are called formal parameters. So now I'm going to run the program. The first time we are using a user defined function. So first number 5 it is going to store in the variable a, second number is going to store in the variable b. After that some function is called, these a and b values are passed, that is copied to the x and y, and the x and y variable will display the content output. So this is the how we can use the function in a C++ function. C++ program. Now we are going to see the next topic where we can use default arguments. Default arguments allows to omit some arguments when calling the function. For example, when you declare a variable function and set the sum of the input as a default value, then it will become the value default value for that very inputs. And if the user didn't give any input to that function, then it will return it will use the default value and do the necessary execution. For example, here you can see void default value. Within that parenthesis, two formal parameters are declared, n1 and n2. Both the variables hold the value 100 and 10 and 100. So this function default value didn't accept did it expect any values from the user. If the user give the values, then that value will store in the respective variables. If the user didn't give the values, then it will use this default value. But the here compiler raises an array error because the declaration or prototype of this function is error. Because so here we declare a variable with int data type, here we didn't mention the int, so it will show the error. In the same way, it is an invalid. It is an invalid prototype where we can use this prototype as like this, where we can set the input and output data types. In the same way, if you mention two variables x and y, if you give the values 200 and 150, it will accept 200 and 150 and store the variable values in the n1 and n2. If you pass only one value, then it will accept that one value and store the value, process the given execution. So we will try the here. So here I'm going to give the y value as 10. So here when I pass the value a and b, when I run the program, I'm going to give the values 2 and 3. We will see the result is 5, but when we didn't pass a single variable, see here when we call the program, I only pass a single value, that is only a value is passed. When I run the program, I enter the value 2 and b value as 3. Now you can see the result 12, because only one is passed here, but when we declare the variable function, we have two inputs, but here when we call, we pass only one value. This value is stored in the variable x, and for the second input, this default value accepted. In the same way, if you set the default value for both the variables, and here when you call the program and pass the both the values a and b, you only see the result of a and b's. It means here I am going to give the value for a and b 4 and 3. You can see the result as 7. The default values are not used because here we pass the current value for both the x and y. But at the time of didn't passing any value to the sum function, then sum function is not going to show any error. It will accept A, it will accept B, but shows the result of X and Y, because at the time of calling the sum function, we didn't give any inputs. That's why sum function takes these default values and process it. If consider that you didn't give any default value for both the variables and you run the program, then at the time of compiling itself, compiler shows an error because you are using a function which have two inputs, but when you calling a function, you didn't pass any variable, any argument, actual argument to this function. That's why it shows an error. So this is called the default value in default arguments of any function, user defined function. Next one is constant argument. A constant variable which is declared in any argument is called a constant argument. We can convert any variable, any argument into constant by simply adding a const word as a prefix to that variable argument. For example, in the syntax you can see return data type function name. Within the parentheses, when you're declaring an argument, use the const keyword and type the data type and type the value. So here you can see minimum const int a is equal to 10. Then this a is becomes a constant value. So when a becomes a constant value, then you cannot change that value. You cannot replace that value with the current value like we did before in the default value examples. So in default value examples, we replace the values of x and y, but the values of x and y is already defined, but we change it the current value. But when you use this const, you cannot change. In the same way, if you use this const before any data type, you didn't change, you are unable to change the function values of the argument. So here when I set the default value for x and default value for y 20, so if you add the keyword const before x and y, and you try to accept the values from A and B from the user and pass the value. When you pass this value to this function, then it is not going to display the result of this phi 3. So both the values are constant and both the values are accepted and cannot be changed at the time of execution. So this is called the const function. So constant arguments. So here in the example 11.16 we will see how we can set the constant value. So open the program 11.16. Here you can see two variables are constant. One is double, another one is r, another one is pi. When we call this area function, where we pass the value r, that is radius only, and didn't pass the double, then it accept the value from the radius and store in the r and calculate the radius of the circle and return the value. So now I am going to run the program. Here phi is passed as radius and this value is copied to the variable r, and here pi value is accepted and pi value and r values are calculated here and return the pi r square value to the screen, to the calling area. This is how we can use the constant arguments. So I hope you understand how to declare a function, how to declare a prototype, how to declare a arguments, default argument and constant argument in user defined function. So clear all your doubts. If you have a doubt, contact me. Prepare well for your examination. Best of luck. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.